Lots of employers, in fact, most of the folks that I work with, right, have a PTO policy, paid time off. And most businesses over the last number of years moved to paid time off policies and away from having a separate bank of vacation and sick.
Oh yeah, because we told them to.
Right, because we told them to.
It's much easier.
And now we're telling them, wait a minute, maybe you shouldn't do that. And why would that be? I mean, what's the, how do you walk through that as an employer?
Okay, so the act does allow employers to combine paid sick time with PTO.
But there's a practical problem with that.
But I would tell everyone not to do that.
Yeah.
I've told every client not to combine them unless, here's my only caveat, if you only offer a day or two of PTO, if you're going to offer fewer than 7 days of PTO, I would combine PST and PTO, because those 2 extra days of the employee having those protections is going to be better. But generally, here's why I keep them separate. Because those penalties and all of the retaliation provisions, if you combine your PTO and your paid sick time, all of a sudden you take what's 24 or 40 hours a year and you blow it up. And all of a sudden it's 80 or 120. So, and which they could take in like 6-minute increments or whatever your minimum increment of time is that you use for payroll purposes. So keep them separate because the burden, otherwise an employee with poor attendance, you're never going to be able to effectively monitor and then terminate if you need to terminate. I mean, there's a risk there. It's not that you can't, but there's a huge risk. Yeah, you couldn't terminate them based on attendance.
Right.
You couldn't do it because if you lump them all together, they're never going to exhaust that 40 because that 40 isn't tracked separately. Here's my other rule of thumb. If somebody calls up and they want to exhaust paid sick time, you want them to exhaust that benefit as quickly as possible because of the broad penalties related to it.
Because of the retaliation provision, and because employees can take this in increments of 1 hour or smaller if you keep your time in less than increments of an hour. So it makes it really difficult if you have an employee who is having a situation with attendance, right, to really kind of monitor that. And so if they exhaust the sick time, then you're out of that retaliation issue and you can kind of proceed down what you would normally do with discipline.
So have in place your systems to monitor and track PST, which not just because I'm telling you to, but because the statute has steep, not steep, but it has penalties for not meeting the record requirements.
Right.
And those record requirements are on each paycheck or on a document along with the paycheck, it needs to say how much PST they've accrued, how much they've used, and how much they've been paid out for sick time.
And you need to keep those for 4 years.
If you don't keep the records, there will be a presumption under the law that you paid out no sick time. And if you're a business that has a lot of executive comp agreements or executive or key employee agreements, that's another form that you want to look at.
Yeah,
because you could have PTO or leave benefits in those agreements, and you may want to do an addendum or addenda for all those agreements saying a portion of that PTO is going to be modified to be in compliance with this new law, and therefore you get 120 hours of PTO and 40 hours of paid sick time, and differentiate it in those agreements, because that's another place that you can find them. It's not just the PTO policy or sick time policy in your handbook. It's going to be those agreements. It's going to be rewards for attendance.
Right.
It could be a call out policy that you have. Those are all things that you're going to need to update and change.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those, so, you know, like I said, I think it's a good time to kind of do an assessment of where you're at and figure out where, you know, what changes you have to put into place for to comply with the statute, and also sort of in general, it's a good time to always update when you take a look at everything at once holistically.